the generalities are always going to be there. The norm is always going to be there. And so as you're reading through the Quran, there's countless, reference to the importance of honoring our parents, even when they would tell us to do something as egregious as disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's still this constant emphasis on obeying your parents, loving your parents, honoring your parents, showing them kindness, lowering the wing of humility to them, not even saying uff to them, which would translate into even rolling your eyes at them or expressing any type of displeasure. All of this is emphasized throughout the Quran. And so Allah is addressing the normal circumstances here, not the exceptions to these rules. And that's the case, by the way, with marital relationships as well, right? Of course, there are some specifics that are given in regards to arbitration and inheritance and things of that sort. But for the most part, when you look at the Quran and the Sunnah, it's speaking to the norm, not the exception. And that can still be hurtful to someone who reads the norm and thinks that either I'm falling short of it, or maybe there's a sign of divine displeasure because I'm not able to live up to this because of my circumstances which are shackling me. And there's a discussion that has to be had there. So I do want to sort of start off with a premise here. The premise is that the only relationship in which there is unconditional obedience is the relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only relationship that exists in which there is unconditional obedience is the relationship between you and your Lord. Every relationship that comes after that, be it parent to child, leader to subject, spouses, children, siblings, employer to employee, all of the relationships that come after that have exceptions, okay? Now, there is no relationship after the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is more emphasized in the Quran and the Sunnah in terms of honor and obedience and love than the relationship of the parent to the child, right? وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. That your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him and that you show excellence and kindness to your parents. So that is there and you can't take that away. That's in the Quran and that's something that's emphasized. Now, I want us to look at this through the lens of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. I just actually had finished the last session of the first. We talked about Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who probably has the most painful story of a mother that commands her child to leave Islam, a mother that tortures herself, which is, in the case of many of the companions, it was even more painful than some of the pain that the parents inflicted on their own children, was the emotional blackmail of the mother of Sa'd radiallahu ta'ala anhu to say that I will starve myself, I will not drink, I will sit outside until the lice collects in my head, until you leave Islam, until you abandon the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That pain that Sa'd radiallahu ta'ala anhu felt was an extremely harsh pain, right? So we just talked about that. That is a very difficult circumstance and a very difficult situation that a person would be put in, especially someone who loves their mother the way that Sa'd loved his mother. Now, there are countless examples of the Sahaba being harmed by their parents when they embraced Islam. In fact, some of them saw their fathers on the opposite side of the battlefield on the day of Badr, and then some on the day of Uhud, but more so on the day of Badr, right? I mean, imagine the pain of these people seeing their fathers on the other side in Badr. On top of that, they are reading the Quran, and the Quran is coming down with all of these references of how to honor your parents, okay? So they had this experience where they were dealing with the situation of being harmed by their parents while receiving the revelation, or rather listening to the Prophet ﷺ receive the revelation of honoring their parents. So of course there's something there, and usually what that's talking about, by the way, is that the parents who ordered their children to commit shirk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered their children not to respond to their command to commit shirk, but at the same time to still honor them despite that, right? Now, for many of the parents, if you don't commit shirk, you are dishonoring me, right? So you have this conundrum. And in that situation where you cannot break this, this tension, if you will, then لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you cannot obey a creation when the creation tells you to disobey the Creator. So at that point, I do everything that I possibly can, but I cannot disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if my parents are going to think that by me maintaining that religious commitment, that I'm still dishonoring them, then I'm going to keep on honoring them in other ways until they realize that their demand is unreasonable. So sometimes it's unreasonable demands, but subhanAllah, like imagine Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu, the pain that he must have felt reading these verses, realizing that he had to escape his father who put him in chains, right? So that did not cause Salman radiallahu anhu to develop a resentment to the Quran, but there was an understanding, right, that there are limits, because the only unconditional relationship of obedience is the one of the servant to his or her Lord. So that's it, right? Now, when we talk about parents, yes, we have to do everything that we possibly can to honor our parents, to show them love, to show them kindness, and we tolerate some of the things that come as a result of, especially their elderly age, and sometimes unreasonable statements or asks. Those are some of the things that might happen, right? Especially as our parents become advanced in age. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually specifies when they become advanced in age, that sometimes as they get older, they're going to say things, they're going to ask things, they're going to do things that might hurt. They might come off as unreasonable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to that reality, right? And I want to say that we have to learn in normal circumstances. We have to do everything that we possibly can in normal circumstances to be the ones that honor the parents and to be the ones that love our parents, because far too many people will will put themselves on equal footing when it comes to a disagreement, when it comes to some sort of fallout, and they will escalate with their parents and quickly resort to a different framework or a different way of thinking that leads them to not treat their parents right. And so I think there's value in what Habib said. And, I talk about my mother, may Allah have mercy on her, all the time, right? I think there is value in us talking about the ayat of the Quran and the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ and the sayings of the Salaf, the sayings of the pious predecessors. Now, what does this not include? There's the famous saying of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and by the way, I don't know of any sanad, any actual chain that would make this binding, but it is a quoted story in many of the books of tarbiyah that a man came to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu to complain about his son, and his son said, does the child have rights upon the father? And Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu said yes. And he said, what are those rights? He said that he chooses a good mother for him, that he teaches him the Quran, that he gives him a good name, or that he gives him a good name and teaches him the Quran. And the father had failed to do all three of those things. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu responded and said, عَقَقْتَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَعُقَقْ, that you have failed him, or far before he failed you, that